Welcome to the Startup Grind.
I like to use ChatGPT to create a PRD document for me. This is very wild having this weird perspective to everything. This is a fat document. Yes, I abuse the deep research part of OpenAI for sure. And so I'll copy this whole file. And then I'll come to my cursor. I don't know if there's a better way to do that, but that's what I do when I go from that open screen. So this is basically what I'll do is I'll just start with an instructions.md file and save that in there, and then use that as a context with the chat agent here. And I say, you guys are going to see all my typos and my fat fingers working right now. So please review. And so when I hit the @ and I'll use this for the docs, and I'll pull in specifically that OpenAI agents docs. And I got Gradio in here too, I think. Video docs.
The first one might be good to specify a more powerful model than auto.
You know, I have actually gotten mixed results that way.
Yeah.
When I've used Sonnet 3.7, like I told you, like it was not any better. It just ran off the rails way faster and way harder. So, and I've also felt that Cursor, them developing their own models, are way more tooled up for the domain of coding because they don't have to generalize across all domains. They've been specifically built and fine-tuned for coding. And so it's read through my instructions doc. So now it has the full context of what I want to build, how I want to build it, and what's the reason for it. And I've found that when I do it like this and start with this, it gives me such better outputs versus just starting cold and fresh, like, hey, I just use this to build this. If I give it all this supporting context, it saves me probably like 10 to 15 errors at least.
So is it like, I know that recently Cursor changed from different tabs between agent and chat or ask. And have you found that going straight with agent versus like starting with your script that says, let me ask you some questions and better define it and then go into the agentic mode? Or is it just agentic mode, that's all I use? And
Yeah, I definitely just stay in agentic mode, and I'll just preface it with the AI like, hey, right now, stop, let's just think, let's not do any code, to kind of get that chat out of it. Mhm. And I did, like you're saying, of like scaling it down and scoping it down, especially when I do full stack apps inside a Cursor. For my first paint is always going to be just UI. Lock that in, do a commit for the UI once I'm happy with it, and then I'll go like feature by feature for the actual functional code. And that's how it really keeps it scoped, and it makes it much easier. It'll still sometimes I'll catch it where it like deleted some buttons off of something, and I'm like, hey, stop, bring that back. And then it makes it much easier for it to bring it all back.
You sub it out and it's test data, then you say like.
Yes. When I do the UI, I hard code data into it because it's the AI writes it, right? So it's super easy to put it in there and it's super easy to delete it out afterwards. And that also helps it with kind of the structuring for, especially when I'm setting up the schema for my database, because it sees that hard-coded data in there, makes it much easier for it to build that schema file. Like, so with Next.js, I'll use, I like using Prisma as my ORM, just kind of being really easy to work with my database. And so once it has that hard-coded data, it's so easy for it to go and generate that Prisma schema file. And that's what I've found has been the fastest and easiest so far.
I love how you play with it.
Oh, yeah.
There's somebody, when they take over, you go, oh yeah, that's no Blight. We'll spare him.
That Dude, I'll even go back, like sometimes like I had the last project that I did with Cursor and I was stuck on a deployment step where I didn't add into my build command the generate the Prisma schema. Yeah, Prisma generate. I needed to add that to my build command. So I was stuck in a loop for like 18 errors. It just wouldn't, it would build in dev, but it wouldn't build when it was deploying to Vercel. So I was stuck in that. And I even felt like after I figured out that was all I needed, I went back to that conversation and told that AI like, hey, this is what we missed. I don't know if I'm weird for doing that, but I felt like I owed it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I've done that too, for sure. You're like, this is what it was, just so you
You
know.
will spare
We're
it,
stuck on
Justin.
this thing, it was actually this.
Hopefully they'll spare me. Yeah. So let me go ahead and grab this.
No, where that data is from.
Well, now when you post this, Rich, we're gonna get people are gonna see my open API key, but that's okay.
I mean, we can. That looks good.
I can just delete this key after we're done. So and then when you guys and you're with the integrated terminal here, I've noticed that if I pop out the terminal, it'll allow the agent to start keep working and it makes it much easier for me. If I leave it in the actual chat, it'll just hang there and sit versus popping it out. And then especially when I'm debugging and I have those issues in the terminal, now that I have it here, I'm able to just highlight a section, hit Command I and bring it into that chat. And it makes it a much easier kind of flow. So when we scheduled this class, that was the day before that OpenAI released this agents API. So to kind of change the scope of this class, I'm happy if we want to do a Next.js project as well. But the first thing I kind of wanted to demo was just the actual agents API that OpenAI just released. And then we could go and implement it kind of as have a Python backend because it only supports Python right now. And then we could do a Next.js front end. If you guys want to stay longer for that, I'm happy to do it. It kind of seems like that's how it is for all of it. It's first they do Python and then like maybe a month or two later they'll release support for TypeScript. And so this is really the benefit of working with OpenAI to build that PRD document first is it saves me so much typing of trying to explain what's the next step to do. So I don't know if it'd be beneficial to kind of walk through the workflow of how I use OpenAI to develop that PRD document because I've found that if I also ask it to append to the bottom of it the atomic steps of like methodically going through and building it, separating each thing, that it makes a much better output in Cursor versus just having a basic PRD.
This is a non sort of coding question, but is sort of this vibe paradigm a necessary approach because you're like abstract of abstract, and you're abstracting so much at different levels that it's actually not possible to literally connect them, right?
Mhm.
Like there's no easy walk between one abstraction and another abstraction. So that you're describing this vibe or this sort of thing going back and forth until you land. Is that fair or is that not?
Yeah, I think you definitely you hit it on the head.
So then I do make this short class here, but in your normal workflow, like how often you actually it's like I feel like to me the idea of vibe coding is kind of like missing because even though like I'm vibing with the code, I always think about like the concept of trusted verify. They're like, that's fine, we created X, Y, Z files, that's awesome.
Mhm.
But like I really don't know like what kind of functionality you've added and like and with at the end of our vibe session. I don't know exactly where that one thing that is failing is.
Mhm.
That, this is all or not, because then I have to go back and like go through the whole agentic context, I guess, the chat and figure out where in that did I, miss.
That's a great question. And so that's where I feel like it's very important in that PRD of explaining how you want to break it down. And kind of like we were talking about of first doing UI, right? And then spinning up the dev server and seeing that UI and making sure you're happy with everything there, committing that, and then choosing one feature at a time to work through with that, right? And so the answer of me checking the code, I don't check anything that it writes until I get that actual demo spun up and I test trying to use it, right? And there's going to be errors, and the next thing I'll do is ask it to add really detailed logging to make it easy for us to then find where these specific breakdowns at. None of it. So that's probably the part that pulls out a lot of people's hair is that part. But I found that I've been able to spin up full apps and deploy them by doing that without having to go through line by line on anything. And so there's the first hallucination there is it already made an env.example file and put that in there, and then it decided to make a new one. I'll delete it. I'll delete it tonight, so it'll be all right. But Mhm. ENV live. Interesting. Dot local? Okay, yeah. I'd never heard of dot live. I was interested. Yeah, and I think it's really cool that OpenAI they have that listener on GitHub where if they see API key get posted to GitHub, they deactivate it right away. I've had multiple projects before I like learned really how to use git ignore, like multiple projects where it just automatically shut down that API key on me. So this first thing that we're building right here is a triage agent. So specifically, it's meant for routing, right? So this could be an example of if you want to do a customer support chatbot and somebody comes to talk about, say, billing, they have an issue with billing, it could route them to a billing specific agent that then has their own database and like specific workflows that, or tools that they have access to versus a customer support agent for like a bad product or some other issue. So now is the moment of truth, right? We see if that's an interesting thing. Why would the agent respond?
It's not like that. Response.
The error response.
Yep.
How do you feel?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't immediately get an error, you know?
It's fun.
And then I like that how that it'll break down all the error message and stuff like that and just give it to me in plain English of what the issue is.
So can you see now right now what model is used? in Spark?
That's a great question. So I have it on auto select. I don't know if there's a way to see which model it's using.
It's an error. You know, are you expecting that it actually just doesn't work at all when you get no response, or are you saying like you and it didn't actually generate what you want?
It could be either or. Generally at first, it's definitely the what the response wasn't formatted correctly or the message wasn't formatted correctly. Or like earlier today, I didn't have any credits left on my OpenAI API, so I kept getting a 429 and I was like it took me 30 minutes to breathe and figure out like, oh, I just needed to add a couple more dollars to my wallet to be able to get it to run. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I've noticed a really long response time with the response API, but not 16 seconds. Generally about 7 to 8 seconds was where I was at. So
With how many people are watching
and it's still going. I that's a great question.
Oh,
You know, that doesn't look like. Yeah, we're at over a minute now, so I think we definitely have an issue here. All right, third attempt. Let's see. There we go. Boom. All right. So it took 3 times of taking it and looking through the file again, explaining what the error was. But it took like the amount of coding I actually had to do was nothing, right? So how do we want to edit this now? How do we want to change it, right? Because I think that's really what we're showing now is how do we quickly now iterate and change things and just move through it? Because
What are we leveraging here? We're leveraging out it for the new library.
yeah, here, I'll pull that up for you. That's a great. Yeah, so this is, yeah. And LangChain was what I was using prior to this, and LangGraph, which was for multi-agent workflows. This is basically OpenAI's version of that exact thing. The OpenAI Agents SDK allows you to have agents. What we were really testing there was a few things. There was agents with tools. And then the big one here is actually with routing. So if we look at, and what they call it off here for routing, they call it handoffs. And so the way that that's set up is on when a user input comes in, there's a what they've termed it as a triage agent that analyzes the user's input and decides out of the agents that it has, where should it route it to. So a great example that template that I had in here prior was for language, actually. Let's see. This is
We made a self-help agent that had a bunch of different therapists in a room. That like raise a problem or whatever, and then it would give you different like Freudian therapists. Then you do it for other things too. Like
Yeah.
projects.
So my real world use case where I'm using this right now is I'm using it to create a boardroom for small businesses and solopreneurs, so that I have a finance agent, I have a marketing agent, right, across the entire boardroom, so that they're able to ask any question about their business and have that relevant agent come and give them information, right? Where that starts to get sticky is trying to give them their own domain expertise. But that's the beauty here of these agents that OpenAI is using. You're allowed to use their vector stores that they have in there for their assistance API. So that makes it very simple where you don't have to build your own connection to a vector store or how to ingest or to properly break it apart. You're allowed to take from the assistance API right now, the backend in OpenAI, create your identity, add the functions, add the knowledge base to it, and then directly pull that in here to populate that agent. And so this agent, this new agent SDK right here, and just this service, the response API, is actually cannibalizing the assistance API. So they're saying that by February 2026, the assistance API is going to be completely gone and replaced with this. And the main thing that they're trying to transfer over right now is using the threads from the assistance API. And so that's a big one in here. So you don't have to have any of your own memory service whatsoever, is because OpenAI manages and persists the thread of conversation between the agents and other agents, as well as with the user. So all you have to do is pass a thread ID in with your API call to have the agents use that as their context. Yeah.
It just occurred to me this is the full level right now and have maybe like different agents that manage the different MCPs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so in this here, well, let me pull it up since we've been talking about it. So here's their documentation directly on how to set up your own MCP servers, as well as for utilizing those MCPs with the agents, right? And so it explains to you how to use it and how to set it up as like that MCP as a specific function tool for the agent to use at its discretion. Yeah.
When it comes to, for example, when your financial data agent is not able to answer the customer question, so they have to go deeper and you have to see these like financial relation. So what are we gonna do with that? What does it mean to feed your say the specific data of from your business, you want to give to the end customer.
Mhm.
So yeah, like how the process looks like you have to pass more data or you have to feed the API agent specific.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a great question. And so I think that goes past the scope of currently where this API is at specifically. But if we were going to look at Lane Graph, um, so Lane Graph is also a multi-agent framework that I very, very recommend very highly. And they also have a full like free course in there that walks you through the entire idea of an agent or how to put together a multi-agent graph. And so there's in here, they have support for, they call it time travel, but basically in that, so your example, right, of like this financial agent, you ask the financial agent a question, but then it needs to go and do its own deep research to go get the answer back, right? It should handle that asynchronously and then be able to call the like the main graph again once it gets its deep research answer to then invoke that agent with the answer. Does that make sense? So that kind of flow. Mhm.
So like we don't have to upload any like file documentation down. Or that would be also a case when you can like upload any information about the specific business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really that's just piping in data, right? Like, so it depends on where you're going to store that at. And so are you, I'm trying to think of what's the best way to explain that. Because I get exactly what you're saying, right? Because that financial agent should one have its own vector store of just financial knowledge, right? So that it's specialized in finance, right? Does that make
Great.
That-
That's what an MCP is for, like, that's what we're talking about here, so like,
Mhm.
maybe the MCP is the Yahoo. Finance, and you have the ability to.
Pull,
access
yeah,
the Yahoo
stock
Finance
tickers and
API,
everything.
or also have access to the sort of details that's out there,
Mhm.
all means and assets. How we put access, that kind of stuff. Sort of like what we do for just creating context for almost like personal videos, you know, you create for the context windows for each agent. And I don't see why the new stuff and open having to handle that and just sort of compartmentalize your data
That's-
into either buckets, like you were saying, the old API, which allows you to create threads from different agents, is going to be cannibalized by this, but in the same way, in each of those buckets, you could put in PDF stuff and backfill it with all the data you want. I think it does see the vector store on OpenAI.
Mhm, mhm.
It allows that to work for each agent. So this just makes it seamless integration. And you brought up the point of asynchronous, ability of being able to talk to these things asynchronously and then feedback.
And re-invoke the graph at a specific point. Yeah.
Which would be really interesting how that works. How does it serialize the asynchronous callbacks from all the different data models?
Yeah. That's a very deep nerdy question that I'm not going to have the answer for you right now. But for that, I think 100% what he's saying, the MCP for that real-time adding context to it. But then you also have to think about how you're piping in like that user-specific data, right? So it's like in that app of having that boardroom of like them being able to have even like a Postgres database of their specific information about their business, right? That's then piped into the prompt template to be added into the conversational context.
Yeah.
Right.
Like a system prompt for all these agents.
Right. Yeah. And then using just using variables within that system prompt. So then it is completely personalized to that user.
Okay, so when it's like not enough for MCP, for example, so I can like upload to Postgres to the database.
Mhm.
They, like this really specific information about my business.
Yeah.
So we can work in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to make it where it's modular so that any user can have that like that specific context to their business, it would be very easy to just have it in a Postgres database and use that specific variable and add it to the system prompt as a variable. So it's piped in every time. Yeah.
Yeah, like your MCP API would be something like, to query for 2024 income, use this function. To query for, all of the expenses, use this function. And then the agent would be able to use your description there and then just sort of expect that those results would be kind of what it's looking for. I think that's how that would, that's how it would work. Which is so powerful. It's just like mind blowing.
Yeah. And when you think about data, right, and especially in this context, there's so many different things to pull from, right? And you have to think about what is going to be static data for that user or what needs to be fresh and pulled at the time of inference, right? That's the big difference there. My business will always be the same business, right? And specific things about it, like what's my website, like, and I think about it in the context of like for SEO, right? And doing automated SEO for business. My URL is always going to be the same. I'm always going to be on the same topic. So that's things that it makes sense to store in Postgres, right? And then pipe it in for that specific thing. Versus like, what is the specific keyword difficulty of this word right now? Or what's the specific volume for this keyword where that needs to be refreshed all the time, which is the same thing of either using an MCP or just using a tool that calls that specific API endpoint. The MCP gives the agents a lot more context to the who, what, and why, like the 5 W's of it, which gives for a better output, but also just being able to set up custom tools where it's just a function call, right? And you use the structured output. What I found for using for function calling and tools is making sure that I use the structured output API instead of using just a regular call. And that increases my reliability of using that tool from like 70 to 80% to like high 90% of it always the tool working correctly.
So, general question to everyone and yourself mostly. I'm just trying to pivot this conversation more into the commercial side and the marketability, making it real to the market. I know enough about agent AI, but not at the level that you guys are talking about. I'm mostly a product guy, right? So today, a founder of a Y Combinator founder of a company reached out to me. Is asking me, is basically they've stood up revenue operations using agent AI. They got a set of agent AIs which does the magic, automatic scheduling and such. If they have a new product that comes to the market, they are able to identify certain attributes and able to dynamically generate the pricing, a probable pricing. So I just want to get a response from you as a broad brush response on what your comments are about this. Now, there are some use cases. The reason he reached out to me is I'm like, I've been in the industry across all the verticals I can think of where the technology fits out of the feasibility or
Okay.
out of the possible.
Mhm.
So what do you think are some of the any use case that come to your mind in the supply chain or financial services area where I can automate all these a bunch of tasks? I mean, just think about loan mortgage system or anything that comes, or maybe a user-based insurance system. Where can I use an agent AI to automate a set of processes? Is that a fair question to ask?
There's a lot to that question.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there are companies that are already doing it, and they're like making solid business out of it. But I also see this as a bleeding edge where I don't want to be at the cutting edge, right? I'd rather be the trailer, right? So are there standards in the market that, I mean, are there enough success stories where we can basically follow the protocol and start adopting agent AI offerings, on our roadmap? I'm just more worried about putting it on the roadmap and then getting caught with the investors saying like, hey, this doesn't work.
So that's a very valid thing. And I think really here, the question is, do you have enough domain expertise to really be able to train that AI agent on that specific workflow, right? Because you can always fine tune, you can always edit prompts to get to a higher level of trust. There will always be, like you guys have seen, there's a fall off on accuracy always. Like we haven't found a way to break this certain like frontier of accuracy. But if you're able to have enough data to process and to fine tune these agents on, then you can definitely get it to a high degree of trust and safety that you should be. Yeah, exactly. Domain specific.
In the marketing automation, we're calling it decisioning companies and decisioning startups. And I think it's just the same thing. They're taking all this logic and It's, vertical specific into probably heavy digital media. But they're, I don't know if it's a rebrand or, I think, I don't understand it nearly as much as you guys on the engineering side, but from the marketing side, it seems like a rebrand. Just a way to maybe move into the enterprise space, but I check out just engineering startups, and I'll have to look around, but it's been all over my LinkedIn feed in the last couple of weeks, especially.
I haven't done a lot of due diligence primarily because I'm building my own product right now.
Mhm.
But AI is something that I've kind of pushed out there. Let me see a few more success stories and then I'll start investing time to understand it better. But right now I got more bigger potatoes to fry, right? So,
We're definitely past the idea phase for
Yeah.
sure. There are many
the
agentic.
adoption phase is where we're at.
Yes, yeah, 100%. There are many agentic workflows that work and provide either a level of efficiency or accuracy that humans struggle to. And like I'm doing in one of my startups right now that specifically helps veterans to file their VA claims, where it's just having the large context of the entire federal regulation for VA claims that is so daunting to have a human do it. It's much easier to have the AI pull that context. And that I'm able to scope it down to specific form fields on a form that have to be filled out correctly. That makes it where it's very easy for the AI to do it like very reliably. So it's about being able to really hone down your actual problem or your use case to its core principles, right? And then being able to apply the AI agent to those core principles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just hobby coding anymore. They're really applying them and using them for sure.
Why can you not do your taxes? I mean, complex. I'm not saying 1040. I'm just talking about massive four companies and K1 schedules and everything.
They can't.
4 properties.
All my taxes are done by AI. It's been that way for 2 years now. I've used AI completely for my tax. I use a service called Keeper. Keeper is an AI tax service, and it's worked very well for me for the last 2 years.
Yeah, because what you said about the startup that you're doing for the veterans to fill up, I already see problems. I'm already full of questions about that because there's so much variability from applicant to applicant to applicant. How does one single denominator of a workflow agent
Yeah,
satisfy everything? And what is it that you're feeding it with? And how is it private and all this?
and I love these are solid questions. That first question of there's so much variability, that's the exact issue that the VA is choking on, right? So from 1990 to today, accuracy of VA claims has gone from 90% to 60% because there's more tools to allow veterans to file their own claims, but they don't know how to fill out the forms properly. By giving this AI model the context of how these forms should be filled out and what's the legal doctrine of what verbiage they need to have in the form for it to move through to the accepted phase is the value that it provides. And being able to take that randomness of human input and put it into a much more structured output is the key to it. And for the privacy side of it, right, I'm using AWS Bedrock for that specifically because I really like how they have made it where the models are separate from the actual inputs coming in. They've put a lot of safety and control around the inputs. So if you're using HIPAA related data or whatever specialty secret data that you need to keep safe, the infrastructure they have set up is very strong for that.
So I thought I had one question, but I have two.
Please.
Calm down. So one is the age-old necessity that the business mandates about HIPAA. You said HIPAA, FINRA,
SOC
SEC,
2,
SOC, segregation, and all that stuff. Multi-tenant, right? So if you are creating that platform, you expect thousands of veterans to subscribe to it, and it's a consumer model, right? How are you doing data partitioning? Do you have to go back to your AWS basics, enabling securing attributes and all that good old stuff? I mean, do you
That's
come
a great
down to
question.
the old age-old architecture of?
And so first, we aren't a consumer business. We are a B2B specific, or it's B2G, right? Business to government, because specifically that's a contract with the VA where we sign in that contract and we have to immediately be able to provide service to every veteran in America. So part of that verification process is also mandated to go through their specific systems of ID me or Gov ID, which are the two verification systems that they have. So in my app, they have to, like, as soon as they make a profile with us and in the onboarding flow, we send them there to get verified. And that's where we actually pull their specific token that allows us to then submit forms on their behalf or pull their data from the APIs from the VA systems, right? And then the requirement from them also is it has to be hosted on the government cloud. So that's a specific like infrastructure that also helps with that security and keeping things safe.
So the second question is, if you're doing this for the veteran forms, I don't know what forms those are, but can you extend, do you also have in your plan to expand the scope to SBIR, SCTR, funds, grants and such for that? I mean, can you just go on and on for everything?
So that's a
Same agent.
That's a valid question. So I would say no, because of the way that you're setting up prompts in the context and the fine tuning for that specific domain of CFR 38, which is the specific title of regulations for veterans, right? But then it could be copied and duplicated for any other government service where it's about like benefits, right? So it could be same thing for unemployment. It could be the same thing for Social Security or Medicare. Yes, it could be then printed to those, right? And that's an idea. But right now, because I'm just focused on the veteran thing, me being a veteran, it also helps because it gives me access to the VA APIs where I'm allowed to do some stuff that normally I'd have to have an agreement with the VA first. So that's my kind of edge into that.
Thank you.
Regarding the VA claim, does it allow, does AI go through medical records and give suggestions to that veteran of what they are eligible for?
Yes. So I'm able to pull all of their medical records from the VA system and pull that in to create a full profile for the veteran. Right. And that's part of the service is just creating that profile for them to be able to print off and have as their own to take with them to the doctor. Because right now that all of that medical information is inaccessible to the veteran. So just that part is a huge value to veterans right there of creating that profile for them to then take themselves to their medical doctors, especially when they're going out for community care. And another big part of it is there's always going to be errors in AI systems. So you need to not be trying to build the perfect system that's going to work right every time. You need to be building in human in the loop in your system every time, especially with anything that's this serious. When it's done and it compiles the claim, I have a human in the loop part of it where it actually displays the VA claim, like the VA form with the printed inputs in there from the AI and ask the user to review them and make sure they feel like they're accurate first. And then part of that of saying, yes, it's accurate, they're also consenting there like, hey, you've read this, you realize that AI does make mistakes sometimes, but you consent to us submitting this on your behalf to the VA, right? So when you're thinking about these kind of use cases, programming in that human in the loop right now is essential, has to happen.
Just out of curiosity, just assume the AI agents were not there, right? If you were to do the same startup like 6 years or 10 years back, how many programmers would you have had without the Cursor IDE or AI assisted IDE? Like, what's your operational cost reduction with AI code?
That's a great question.
Do you do it yourself?
It's just me. Just me and
otherwise it would have been
yeah, and I'm already in talks with the VA. Like that's the level that these AI IDEs are able to get you to is you're able to build that full MVP and I'm to the point where now I'm saying like, all right, when do I push onto the government cloud?
Yeah, because I think, I mean, there are a lot of experts here, but one of the requirements also from the VCs is to look at the revenue per employee, right? So which is the expectations of
that's a healthy metric, whether it's VC or anything. Any business owner should be looking at their revenue per employee. Because if you're at less than 50K revenue per employee, then you're dead.
It's 2x according to VCs. It's 2x since 2022. To where it was like 150 or something, it's now 300 or between 300 and 400.
Yeah, and especially in technology.
Years, yeah.
Well, because you got to think about how much you're paying people, right? Like if you're not making more than 50K per employee, then you can't be paying them more than 50K. And then who are you paying full time at less than that, right? And thinking about developers or any of these higher level skill sets, like you need to be making $1 million an employee. To
Question, so how do you have these contexts that this bot or this agent is pulling from? A lot of these have inherent biases, right? And that could be one way or the other. It's even not a value judgment. Like, can you get something to start to tune out some of that bias, right?
Absolutely.
So, okay,
So what you're talking about, this bias here that's in this underlying LLMs, right? And based off of what the data that they were trained on. But as soon as you start adjusting those weights by fine tuning yourself, those biases start to lose efficacy, right? Because those same weights that hold that bias are now getting adjusted again. So it's very easy, especially if you want to take an open source model like DeepSeek, right? And then you want to do your own fine tuning on top of it. You can overwrite a majority of the bias. Depends, right, on the quantity of data and the size of the model you're trying to overwrite. If I wanted to try to overwrite this trillion parameter model that is GPT, it's going to need a shit ton of fine tuning data, right? But for taking smaller data models, which I'm a huge fan of using the smallest model possible, right? Especially when you guys are building apps that's for a specific domain, you don't need generalization. You don't need it to answer everything. It needs to answer just what you need it to answer. And so if you can go to a smaller model and really fine tune it specifically on that, you're going to get unprecedented levels of accuracy and performance because it's going to be such a smaller model, so easier, and it's going to be a lot cheaper for you to run.
What model you use for this application?
For that one, so I've been playing around with a couple different models because I've also looking at bias or just looking at the quality of the outputs. Right now, I'm still going through testing of every different model that AWS Bedrock offers. Because when I first built the very first MVP, I was using OpenAI and then moving over to Bedrock, right? I have Anthropic models. I have, what's the Jurassic one? That was the last one I was playing with. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
AWS?
Yeah.
Nova?
No, so Nova's that brand new one that they just came out with. No.
Amazon Q.
No, so in Bedrock, they have multiple model providers, and there's quite a few different LLMs in there that you're allowed, that they have. There's Jurassic, I feel like it was Jurassic, or you know what I'm talking about? It's like Jurassic 2.1. That's the most recent one I was trying out. I think Mistral's the next one. Yeah.
Have you tried not using proprietary models? Just like using an instrument and setting up a GPU, thinking that yet, like, I know it requires a little bit of stand-up, but it saves on inference costs, so.
Oh, 1,000% agree. And once I have those dollars coming in for the government, that's the first thing I'm going to is doing that. 100%.
Run pops, pretty great.
Okay. Runplot. Yes. And then there's like Planet Scale. There's a couple others.
It's pretty popular.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Run
She
pops.
told me about that one. That was a good one.
So help me understand your workflow. You created a PRD, you put it in Cursor, you kind of did a bunch of loops on creating your SaaS app, which is better now. And then if you encounter an error, there's a loop of, let's say, 3 before it actually finished, and you got an output, right? But as you scale up, as the government demands more or less or whatever new privacy thing comes out, as you start increasing the amount of complexity that your app creates, do you feel like your error loop is going to increase?
That is a great question, Jonathan. So I think it's very important as being these now going from like coder to really being a product manager, of being able to truly scope it down to the bare minimum possible, right? Always try to give Cursor the smallest context to focus on, because the smaller the context it has to focus on, the higher outputs you will always have, right? And those are great problems that I am worried about, but I think at that level, I may actually look at investing in people that are much more reliable and can spend more time on that problem other than just an infra spin.
I love the idea that you're creating, mostly because I always think that when things go from complex to simple is where innovation really starts. Because like if you think about like somebody in the 90s trying to create a website versus somebody now who's creating, I used to create GeoCity, rapidly websites and put a GIF up, and I thought that was really cool. But now, like you could do that like in a heartbeat, right? So like I think innovation like this, where you're creating, hey, like I created a startup, like that's wonderful. But as you scale, like those are the problems that really, when you start actually getting users, like I think that's when the problems really start. And I think that's a wonderful thing to have.
100%, 100%. And where we are today versus where we were just like last year, at the end of last year in December, is light years ahead, right? So where we see ourselves in 6 months from now, maybe Cursor's even to a point where I'm not scared of those issues coming and happening.
There are, I heard about enterprises
Mhm.
and they prohibit for developers using LLMs, any type of LLMs on the project, specific project. So have you heard about that also? And like, I mean, government, they have to be secure and probably they do not trust like the LLMs and that stuff. So have you experienced that with enterprises or governments, like spaces or industries?
Absolutely. There is definitely always and I shouldn't say definitely always, but there is always people questioning and concerned about accuracy, safety, and privacy, right? And that's why also, as part of that process of getting contracted with the government, part of it is third-party reviews and analysis of it for those risk factors or those errors.
Is better available in government cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
models.
really.
No, so that's the question, is whether I'm going to have to host my own model and build it completely in the government cloud, or if I'm going to be able to use those Mistral or those other ones in the government cloud.
Yeah, I'm a government guy, and I can tell you that on government networks, DoD networks, you can't access ChatGPT direct. They have their own agents, and those own agents per service. So the Army has their own agent that's kind of like a ChatGPT thing. It's called Camo GPT.
Of course it is.
And then you have the Navy they're evolving their own agents, but they're very specific on what they allow on that network.
Only
Yeah.
government based.
Well, and specifically for that, because you have different levels of security on different networks, right? Because you have like SIPRnet, you have your different model. Those ones, they're going to have to host it within those contained spaces, because it doesn't make sense to go from a very controlled safe space like SIPRnet to then go to the open internet and then come back. That creates that attack vector that they can't allow. So 100% that would have to be hosted a own model, which would probably be what's going to end up happening is doing my own model and hosting it there within the government cloud itself.
They make you go through the risk management framework to validate because I know guys that have attempted, small business that have attempted gone through that this over 10 years and they couldn't get through.
Yeah, there's a mountain to climb, but I'm just, the same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time.
One more second.
Yeah, no, please. This is good.
I recently received a request from customer to build like 48 agents. They are in SEO, SEO optimization niche, and they want the sales agents to be like one of them in like sales prospecting, another one account management. I don't know why they differ. Like
Yeah.
them. But I mean, our company, they're not able to process it. If somebody, I mean, have experience in portfolio cases and I can just transfer this customer to you. He's from North Carolina. I mean, you want to
Interesting.
contract like that?
That's literally what I'm building right now for my own marketing agency here in Sacramento. That's funny. Yeah. Hey, you take it, man. Take it. We can work together collaboratively. And then, hey, let's sponsor the pizza so that Rich doesn't have to keep buying everybody pizza. Yeah, we'll all work together, man. It's good.
I like to fight in the parking lot better.
Well, I really appreciate this, guys. This has been really good. I'd love to keep having this question and answer session. I think this is more valuable than me just hitting enter on the screen with Cursor right now.
So, I mean, when Copilot first came out, I remember there was a discussion about intellectual property and like what the data used for training these models. I think kind of died down, or I haven't heard much about it. Is
It's
that still the topic.
It's in court right now, and where it is really in court is with Adobe, because Adobe is probably the most hardcore one of taking artists' work that have used Adobe Cloud for storing their artistic work, whether it's photography or videography, to train their Firefly model. That's the one that's still in court right now. And the reason why you don't hear about it is because when you're in those court proceedings, you do not talk to the press.
Yeah, I remember with the image generation, right? There was some too, because they were, I forget, it was some manga.
They're creating like a Mickey Mouse
Yeah, there was a very specific like anime. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was just curious because you were talking about risk and all these things, but when you build an application, right, there's also like this code that's generated and data was used to train it. There's this intellectual property question. Which
Yeah.
isn't any different than someone copying and pasting stuff from Stack Overflow or whatever, but
Yeah.
it's still there.
Yeah, and I think you brought up the perfect point there, right? Because we all went and read Stack Overflow and found that the solution to some of our problems. Like, should we then attribute it and credit to Stack Overflow and the commenters there, or where does it die? And I think that's really where it's sitting in court now. I think the one where it's going to be the most iffy and it's going to be where it sets the precedent is going to be with images, right? Images and video, because artistic people are very protective over their intellectual property and what they're doing. And justifiably, right? It's an art form. It's them. It's their identity. So I understand them fighting for it and wanting to have their side of it. But when it's a stable diffusion model that's then just removing static and putting static in there, like, is it really the same thing?
One is to set up one of these agents for a specific task, say like a medical decision, something like that. And it was claiming that it was using context from like historical or reading medical journals or whatever context it gave it. But if you were an insurance agency, right?
Mhm.
Like theoretically, you could turn that dial, right? To
Mhm.
come up with an output that as a customer, I wouldn't trust.
Absolutely.
Right, so is there any system that can verify that a context is being used properly? You know what I'm saying, like, so that an
I
insurance
hear
company
you.
can say, yes, we use this data and it's not tampered with. So that the context is not filtered.
So this is forever will be a cat and mouse game as it is today,
Mhm.
even in that context, right? Like, there's already very easy tools for the way that you scrape data. Like, and so here's the thing, for very specific use cases like health and that kind of thing, it's probably going to have to be vetted data, pre-approved data that is used in that context and that decision-making process. You're probably opening yourself up to litigation if you're going to just let it have open space to go search the internet, because that's where you start to lose a lot of accuracy and a lot of trust, right? So in those specific use cases, it's probably a closed loop system. They're probably not giving it deep research to go look at medical journals, right? It'd probably be they'd download a corpus of medical journals from Google Scholar and keep that as a separate database to then query.
Right, I get that part. What I'm saying is, how would I trust that their agent is using that corpus not
Ins-
to their benefit?
instead of-
to my, like,
Mhm.
they just turn the knob to like,
There's 100% chance that they put some UI features that say, hey, we pulled from this sources, but in the prompt it says, just give them this output. And that is the evil side of human beings that I don't think that any amount of code will be able to change or remove.
here's an evil story, which is, I was working with this guy, and he was an attorney for Chevron. And so the Nexus Lexic database, right, and all the databases that reference scientific material, we have spent, centuries building all this knowledge and making it so that you can
Trust
index
it.
it and follow it. He said, oh, what I do is I write whatever the hell I want and I throw it in there, and Nexus Lexic give me the citation. So just keep going. So it looks completely like it's written well.
Yeah, and so that's the maleficence of that person, right? Yeah,
It's also the use of the tool. It's undistinguishable from the use of the whole system.
yeah, that's fair. I think there's a whole startup to put there.
They're really different than a lot of non-probabilistic systems anyways, like, I mean, when I go on and ask, what's my credit score, and they say, oh, it's 600 or 800, whether it's biased in one way or the other, how do I really know that they didn't just make up that number because they don't really a lot of them?
Oh, absolutely.
They actually determined it through
Yeah.
this deterministic process that I can.
Right, well, that's what I was asking, is like, could there be a system so that the context they're using, I could believe, that's. I
Yeah.
agree with you.
It's called the blockchain.
There you go. That big brain over here.
Wasn't there some sort of legislation that's basically saying if something like your credit rating, then you have to explain it if you question it.
Right.
Yeah, the issue is those 3 credit bureaus are corrupt in the first place. And so, and that is a real issue that you're bringing up right there. Cause I've bought cars before where Credit Karma says I'm at a 775 and then they say, oh no, you're only at a 730. So we're not going to give you that extra half percentage off or something. Right? Like
Because
100%.
it's a new model that they just dropped. last
Yeah,
year.
yeah. It's very hard to program out humans out of this existence.
Fairly new to this, especially MCP stuff. So MCP is like a domain expert base or a
So-
knowledge base of a certain domain or?
So it's called Model Context Protocol, which is the same thing as application programming interface. So like an API. Basically, it's just the standardized structure of how data should be transferred between the two. And so just like, when you build an API right now and you use Fast API to auto build your documentation, right? And makes it really easy for other developers to then use that API. Basically, that's what this MCP is, but for allowing AIs to then use it.
Okay, so it's not about the data, it's about the.
Yeah, it's about the structuring and how you query it and understanding how to query it and what you're expected to get out of it.
There any thoughts on why OpenAI just gave up and said, or not gave up, but chose to go with an Anthropic MCP protocol?
I think there's so many candles burning
Sure.
that you got to choose your battles, right? And it makes a lot of sense for AWS, who is the main investor in Anthropic, to really push for that MCP and try to get on that side of things,
Is there
right?
something unique or differentiated with you think with that MCP protocol that is a standout that might move the standard moving forward?
That's a great question, right? Because then it's a question of how do you commercialize that and get a competitive advantage on it, right? And so maybe it'll be hosted like a hosted service that makes it really easy to spin up MCPs and then to share them and monetize them. And then it's the next app store is off of MCPs, right? Yeah, exactly. Because you saw it with OpenAI when they tried to do their custom GPTs and they were going to be the app store killer with their custom GPTs, and then it never actually got monetized, never ended up like panning out. So I think OpenAI is really focused on the frontier of trying to build the state of the art model, right? That's their main zone, and it makes sense for them to kind of stay there right now. Cool. Well, guys, it's 8 o'clock. This is generally when we cut it off. I hope that you guys had a good time.